All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're digging into the latest Woodbury development log, and it details a huge architectural shift. We're talking about how their automation pipelines went from being these simple, clunky files to actual professional TypeScript codebases. It's a massive change that really redefines what you can even do on the platform.
So, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the old way of doing things, the V1 pipelines, and see why they kind of hit a dead end. Then, we'll dive into the V2 revolution, the big solution. We'll check out how they keep the code and the visual graph in sync, which is super cool. After that, we'll see what this all unlocks for developers and wrap up by talking about what this means for the future of automation.
Okay, so to really get why this new way is such a big deal, we have to take a quick trip back in time. We need to see what the original architecture looked like. What exactly was a Woodbury pipeline, or a composition as they used to call it, back in the V1 days? Back then, a pipeline was, well, it was basically just one giant JSON file. Seriously, everything, every single node, every connection, all your custom logic, it was all crammed into this one document. And if you needed to write some JavaScript, you literally just embedded it as a string right there in the JSON. Kind of wild, right?
And look, for simple little automations, this worked just fine. But the devlog makes it clear that as soon as things started getting more complex, this structure, it really started to fall apart. It created some major headaches. The team even started calling it an opaque JSON blob, which, yeah, pretty much sums it up.
So yeah, this whole everything in one JSON file approach just hit a wall. The devlog talks about this a lot. It basically created a glass ceiling. It put a hard limit on how big, how complex, and frankly, how useful these automations could ever be. And for developers, this was a huge headache. I mean, just imagine trying to do a code review on a pull request where the only change is in a giant, minified JSON file. It's impossible. Your code editor couldn't help you. No type safety, no auto-completion, nothing. And testing, forget about it. It was all manual and just a total pain. It just didn't feel like you were working on a real software project. So that was the big question facing the Woodbury team, right? How do you smash through that glass ceiling? How do you take this thing and turn it into a real platform for developers? And the answer to that question, well, that's what led to the V2 revolution.
And this is where things get really interesting. The solution, as the log lays it out, was to completely rethink what a pipeline is. It's not a single file anymore, not even close. The V2 architecture turns a pipeline from a static blob of JSON into an entire file-backed TypeScript codebase.
This slide really nails the difference. On one side, you've got the old V1 way. It's like a single recipe card. But on the other, you have V2, which is more like a professional cookbook. A pipeline is now a whole project directory. You've got a manifest file, separate TypeScript files for all your logic, a package manager for your dependencies, a README for documentation, even test files. It's a proper grown-up development project now. Okay, but this brings up a really important question, right? If you're editing code in one place and you've got a visual graph editor in another, how on earth do you keep them from getting out of sync? The answer, according to the log, is a pretty brilliant bidirectional sync engine. So here's the magic behind it. A developer can be in their favorite editor, like VS Code, just writing TypeScript. And to define the inputs and outputs for a node, they just use these simple JSDoc comments. A sync engine is running in the background, constantly watching these files. The moment you save a change with one of those comments, the engine parses it, updates the main manifest, and poof, the visual graph in the UI instantly updates to match. And the coolest part is it works both ways. So the code and the graph are always in lockstep. And this is the most crucial takeaway. It's a total paradigm shift. The code is now the single source of truth. The graph you see in the UI, that's just a visual representation of the code, not the other way around. That single idea is the foundation of the entire V2 system. Now, this whole architectural change isn't just some nerdy academic exercise. It has real-world consequences, and it unlocks a ton of professional-grade tools for building and managing these automations. And for proof, look no further than this. The latest log shows off native Git support baked right into the platform. You can now initialize a repo, check status, commit, and push all through the API or right from the user interface. You can even just give it a GitHub URL and clone an entire pipeline to start working. It's incredible. This right here, this is the payoff. This is what it's all about. Developers can now use modern TypeScript with full type safety, and it just gets transpiled on the fly. You can work in VS Code or whatever editor you love. You can write real, automated tests. And maybe the biggest win of all, You can use the entire Git ecosystem for version control, for code reviews, for collaboration, treating your automation just like any other professional software project.
All right, let's wrap this up. When you take a step back and look at this whole evolution, what does it really tell us about where automation is heading? So we've seen this journey, right? Woodbury's pipelines have gone from these clunky, hard-to-manage JSON blobs into living, breathing, version-controlled TypeScript code bases. They're now true software artifacts that you can manage with professional tools.
This whole thing makes you wonder, doesn't it? Is the future of automation just better software engineering? Because that's what we're seeing here. It's this powerful convergence. All the things we take for granted in software development, version control, testing, modular code, they're becoming the absolute foundation for the next generation of automation. That line between writing code and building an automation, it's getting blurrier and blurrier. And honestly, that's a super exciting future to think about.